Hello there, this is Miriam, holistic life coach and mind body practitioner at Pain Outside the Box. And today I'm going to be explaining how you can get unstuck from that feeling, that state of preoccupation about your pain or symptoms. That state of feeling that you're trying, you're learning, but you're not making any progress and you're starting to get really worried and preoccupied with your symptoms. I'm sure that there are a lot of you out there who are in this state, who have learned about the mind-body connection, who suspect that your symptoms are emotional, they're mind-body symptoms, but at the same time, they're stuck feeling extremely worried and preoccupied about the nature of their symptoms. And this is actually keeping them stuck. So let me get started by explaining first what keeps you stuck before I go on to suggest tools in order to get past this state. So, assuming that you have started your mind-body journey, okay? Assuming that you have accepted that your symptoms may have an underlying emotional issue, maybe what we used to call psychosomatic, what I call TMS, or what today we also call neuroplastic. So in this video, I am assuming that you have an idea, a general idea about mind-body symptoms, but you're still feeling stuck with these symptoms. You can't stop thinking about these symptoms all day long. So first of all, in order to progress, you have to know that you're stuck, right? And a lot of people actually don't realize. They think that they have been trying to learn about mind-body syndrome. They have been maybe following different videos like this one. They have been reading, certain websites, certain blogs, or even some books on TMS. They have been listening and they have been consuming a lot of information, and maybe they have been trying some techniques as well. So they can get really frustrated. Like, why are the symptoms still there? If I'm kind of doing the right things, I'm doing the things that people out there are recommending. But what they don't realize is that even though they're trying this and that or learning this and that, their main focus is still their preoccupation with their own symptoms. I also see a lot of people out there, especially on social media groups, asking about their specific symptoms, asking if there's anyone else who has had these symptoms and who has recovered. And I know that there is a time when we need some sort of hope and encouragement. But I also notice that a lot of people keep asking this question. They keep wanting to find someone else with their exact set of symptoms, which can be extremely difficult because with mind-body syndrome, symptoms can vary so much from one individual to another. So instead of actually doing the work, which I'm going to be talking about later on, they're actually still looking for reassurance. So ways in which people do this is by, as I said, asking whether someone else has their exact set of symptoms. I see also a lot of people asking practitioners or coming to me, for example, emailing me, asking if I have helped people with their exact set of symptoms, because they feel that if their symptoms are slightly different or special, then maybe they cannot be cured. So they are not even starting the work. They are stuck in the state of seeking reassurance that they can actually overcome their symptoms. But just by, let's say, me telling them that, yes, of course, you can heal. There are a lot of indicators showing that your symptoms are mind-body. They still don't move on to the next stage, which is the TMS work, the emotional work. Right? So usually when one is stuck in a state of preoccupation, there's also this extreme focus on symptoms. As I said, the nature of symptoms, how they're manifesting. They keep going back to what one doctor told them, that maybe they have a structural abnormality, whereas we know that a lot of structural abnormalities should not cause pain. So in this case, there's a whole lot of doubt in whether they can address their symptoms as a mind-body syndrome. And unfortunately, actually, a lot of people stay stuck in that state of doubt. They try some things, but because they are still hyper-focused on the symptoms and scared about whether they can actually succeed with the mind-body approach, they stay stuck there. So as I always like to say, there has to be a point when one has to decide first. One has to firmly decide to address the symptoms as a mind-body issue. And there are various ways in which you can do this. I'm not saying that you have to kind of always assume that whatever symptoms you experience, they are a mind-body problem. Today we have tools. We have mind-body syndrome assessment tools. We have mind-body indicators. I have a list of all these indicators also on my website, and I'm going to put a link in the description as well so you can consult them. But you will find questionnaires and assessments, by other practitioners, by other mind-body doctors, which will allow you to sit down on your own, not having to ask other people, on your own, go through these indicators and see whether there's a case for your symptoms being mind-body. And I'm not going to focus on all these indicators here. I have a separate video for this. But what I'm going to tell you is that if you resonate, or if your symptoms fit 3 or 4 of these indicators, then it's most probably all mind-body syndrome, right? It's really, really unlikely to have like multiple symptoms in the body that are structurally unrelated, and for all of these symptoms to be a case like a structural issue, an acute injury. It's really not possible for you to injure, your body all over. It's too much of a coincidence. Coincidences don't exist, right? If you have multiple symptoms, if your pain has persisted despite different treatments, if it comes up and down, if it fluctuates, if you feel it on both sides of the body, not necessarily, just in some cases, but there are many indicators that when looked at together, and when you make your own list of which indicators fit for you, it becomes quite obvious and evident that your symptoms are a mind-body problem. Now, to go back to the very basic of TMS, to go back to the founder, the person who first noted and studied this, Dr. John Sarno, what he said was, if you have TMS, then you have to start thinking psychological. So to think psychological about your symptoms means that you are stopping the search for a structural explanation for your symptoms. That's what it means. It means that instead of seeing, let's say, your shoulder pain as an injury that has not healed, and looking at your MRI and finding any deformity, any abnormality, and getting concerned, super concerned about that, if you have enough indicators, you ask yourself instead the question, what could this mean emotionally? What happened before the onset of this symptom that could have made me feel unsafe in my life, distressed, super stressed, right? What was going on in my life? Or what is going on in my life now that makes my body want to scream through the pain that it's sending out, through the pain signals it's sending out? Thinking psychological means that you assume that your symptoms are just a voice for something else. They're just a consequence of emotional distress. They're trying to distract you, maybe from deeper emotions. They're trying to scream something at you. Maybe you're neglecting yourself. Maybe you're not on the life path that you wanted to pursue. Maybe you've never listened to your instincts, your gut feelings, and now you're not living in alignment, right? And this is a topic that I personally love as well. Part of the work is actually getting in alignment with who we are. It's getting in alignment with our values, with our priorities, with what we really want to do. A lot of the time, symptoms come up to kind of keep us preoccupied, on the nature of our body, to prevent us from actually doing that soul searching, from actually maybe changing, even though deep inside of us, a part of us feels that we need a change in some aspect of our life. So from now on, what I'd like you to take away from this video is the fact that this preoccupation that you have about your symptoms, right? This constant worry and attention you're giving these symptoms is actually kind of a distraction for you. It's actually distracting you from the real underlying stuff that you need to deal with. And I'm not saying in this case that, we should totally ignore the pain and, we should say that the pain is totally okay when it's actually painful, when it's actually annoying. I don't want to go into denial here to force anyone to deny the fact that the pain is uncomfortable. Yes, we can accept and even say to ourselves that this pain is uncomfortable. This is intense. Wow, what's happening to my body? I don't like this. Of course, I'm not telling you that you should like having symptoms, right? But what I'm telling you is to see the symptoms for what they are. They are a consequence of something else, right? And just getting preoccupied about this consequence isn't taking you anywhere. It's blocking your progress because you're just hooked on it. You're hooked onto the symptom, onto the consequence, and you're never exploring the underlying cause. So to go back to Dr. Sarno, my number one suggestion, and the quickest way to actually get out of the stuckness of being stuck in preoccupation is to think psychological. Ask yourself every time you have a flare, every time you feel that your symptoms are high and you're starting to get so frustrated and scared, ask yourself the question, what do I want? What does the symptom mean? What do I really want? You can pretend that you have like this inner child deep inside. This is what I actually do myself. You can pretend you have this inner child deep inside of you, right? And you know that the symptoms are its cry for help. It's crying for help by creating these symptoms. So I would ask that child, I would ask her like, okay, just tell me what you want, right? I don't want that symptom. We don't need to have to deal with that symptom. Just tell me what you want, really. What is this about? What happened? And then something would come up, something like, 2 days ago, you had that conversation with your husband and, I don't like this about it. I don't like that about it. I would rather do this, and you haven't listened. You pretended to agree with your husband and everything. Whatever, right? So this is just an example for you here. But as you can see, I'm just giving that inner child a voice. Because when we do that, we actually eliminate the reason for that inner part of ourselves to create a symptom, right? We are actually going to the real issue there, to the deeper issue that we may not have been acknowledging, right? And I know that a lot of people out there will say, but my main problem are the symptoms. It's if I didn't have symptoms, then I wouldn't have any other issues, or I would be able to deal with my other stressors, no problem. But this is hardly ever the case. There is a part of the work that, yes, deals with your own response to the symptoms. It's an important part of the work. And I discussed this in other videos, right? How not to buy into the fear, how to react differently with symptoms. However, if your symptoms are loud, if you keep having new symptoms, if you keep having flares, there's usually always a deeper issue. And it's the nature of repressed emotions to be repressed, to be kind of not accessible to us all the time. So it's always worth to think psychological. Even if you feel that you're kind of doing guesswork, even if you're not sure whether the answers that come up through your inner voice and your writing and your speaking, you're not sure that that's the real issue, that's okay. You're still giving that part of yourself a voice. Right? One other way you can do this is to write a dialogue with your own symptoms. You can kind of, let's say you have leg pain, you write leg pain, and then there's yourself, your conscious self, and your conscious self would be asking the leg pain, like, listen, what is this about, right? Do you really have to be so intense? And then just see what comes up. What would the leg pain say? And it can be an interesting back and forth conversation if you just allow yourself to kind of write whatever comes to mind without too much logical thinking. This has to kind of flow out of you when you do this kind of exercise. So it's best also to kind of take your time, just ask your symptom what it wants, see what comes out. And anything is valid. I mean, sometimes there's not just one reason why you're having symptoms. There might be multiple. So it's good to explore this from multiple angles as well. And before I conclude, I'm going to also explain what not to do if you want to get unstuck, right? You have to stop the constant consumption of different kinds of information as well. This can include my own videos, by the way, right? Limit yourself to 1 or 2 sources of information, not even per day, 3 times a week. You can learn something, reflect on how it applies to you. But if you're constantly scrolling on social media, watching different things, listening to different people, you will get overwhelmed. That's one of the problems, and getting overwhelmed will get you stuck, because you're gonna feel like you're on a wild goose chase. You're trying different things, or you're trying to see what could work for your symptoms, but you're not actually committing to a process, right? And by the way, this is the hardest thing actually for me as well as a coach, is to get people to commit to a process. Because once there is that decision to commit to TMS work, or to commit to some other mind-body healing work for that matter, once there is that decision, usually then things start to progress and flow. Once someone stays consistent to, a program, to the action steps that's given by your coach, that's usually gonna lead to progress, right? The problem is when you're stuck trying to decide, what approach to try, trying to decide whether your symptoms fully qualify, when you're stuck blaming past health issues or past injuries for your pain, that will keep you stuck. So the best takeaway I would say from this video has to be just get yourself unstuck by deciding that you have a case for mind-body syndrome and starting to do the emotional work for it. No more second guessing, no more doubting. Just give yourself a time. There's always going to be some skepticism. That's okay. Lay that aside, and move on and trust this process of mind-body healing, this process of self-exploration, which, by the way, if there is no self-exploration, if you're just hooked on trying to figure out your symptoms, then it's not going to work. There always has to be a process of exploring what you want and a process of alignment. Always going to know that you need to think psychological. You're always going to know that you have to divert yourself from falling for that distraction to actually exploring what the symptoms mean. And that's when the real work starts. That's all from me for today, and I wish you all a lovely week ahead. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.